Adventurous audio. From idea to ear. I'm going to start this episode with a confession. In the past, when I've thought about self-harm, I've always pictured someone cutting or burning themselves, because that's the kind of self-harm I've witnessed in people I know. But what if self-harm takes more subtle, less obvious forms? How do you help support someone when their method of self-harm goes under the guise of normal, or when it's just less overt? Well, that's what we're talking about in this episode of Speaking of Suicide. As always, if it feels too difficult to listen to, please do press pause and get some support. You'll find the links to Mikeysline in the show notes. I'm Penny Stewart, and I'm with Charles Harris, who is a peer practitioner with Self-Harm Network Scotland. Charles, great to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you face to face. I'll readily admit I'm out of my depth on this one.
Yeah.
I don't know much about self-harm, so I'm hoping you're going to keep me straight.
Okay.
And if I say something that is really insensitive or bang out of order, or just plain ignorant, please pick me up on it.
I'll do my best.
All right.
Yeah.
We make that deal from the get-go, because
Yeah.
I really want to understand this issue better.
Yeah.
I feel it's so important, and I'm absolutely delighted that you've agreed to talk to us, along with Trevor here, who's very excited, your puppy. Very excited that I'm here. Let's cut to the chase.
Okay.
As I mentioned there, you didn't initially self-harm through cutting.
No.
So what form did your self-harm take?
My self-harm took a form that was one that I didn't recognise at first for a long time. I had been stuck in the crux of my own mental health for many, many years for various reasons. And what I did was, in part, to abuse medication in one extreme or another.
Was this sort of over-the-counter stuff? Or
No, this is
meds?
prescription medication.
Yeah.
And it came in two forms for myself. So I would either completely deny taking it, therefore increasing everything that was already kind of going on for me, making it 10 times worse, and me never being able to figure out why I wasn't getting better and why my moods were still so erratic and why I was so angry. Or it would go to the polar opposite, and I would take too much all at once and feel like I had magically fixed myself. It didn't just stay there, unfortunately, because with that, when I was in states of having kind of complete and utter erratic moods, that I admit I had zero control over it, because I was so confused as to why I just wasn't normal, that I then started to do other things, which was things that put myself into risky situations for the sake of adrenaline, or wanting and needing to feel strong and feel like I had a place. And it encroached into my work life as well. I was a prisoner court custody officer for years, and I found myself putting myself into the firing line of situations that I really didn't need to be, for the rush, for the adrenaline, for the power. But at the same time, knowing full well that I was doing that for all the wrong reasons.
We'll need to come and pick this apart, because it's obviously quite a complicated picture. But even if you didn't recognise it necessarily as self-harming at the time, should we talk a bit about what your entry into all this was? Why did it start? Why did you start harming yourself with the prescription meds first of all?
With hindsight, I've got a completely different view on it as to how I did back then. At the time, when I first started, I started when I was 17. I became a teenage mum. I had my daughter just after my kind of 18th birthday, and I wasn't in the best situation. I was in a kind of domestic violence situation, and I didn't know how to cope with that. I didn't really know where to go or who to turn to, and I was hiding it from everybody. I was hiding it from my family and my friends, and I felt so powerless to change that I tried to make a different aspect to my life, something that I could manage, something that I could control, and to give myself what I felt like was purpose at the time. Like, I can control this part, so everything else doesn't matter, it's okay. I had literally just given birth, and that it brought back a lot of stuff for me that I had blocked out for a long time from my childhood as well, which was something that I wasn't emotionally ready to face. I hadn't processed it. I had blocked it out for a reason. I didn't want to think about it or kind of go near it. It was safe at the back of my head. But when you're in a situation like that and you're 17 and you're having a baby and your hormones are, like, at the best of time, even as an adult, they're everywhere, but I could not cope with what was happening in the situation I had found myself in, and I felt ashamed of where I was.
And how did controlling the meds make you feel? How did that control help? What? At
the start, it was literally purely that basis. It was, I control this. This is the one thing I've got. This makes everything a lot better. Like, I can do this. And that felt good. Like, that felt like I was doing something right, because the doctors trust me with this medication. Nobody else kind of trusts me. The fact that I'm in this relationship and that I've had a child at 17, there was like things that I had kind of faced in questions and comments and kind of stigma around being a mum at that age as well, that when I did this, and it gave me power. I feel like it gave me what was missing at that time, and I had no control over anything. Because I couldn't even control the baby that was in front of me, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing at 17. But when I did this, either to take too much to sleep, or to stop the thoughts, to stop the thinking, or when we were at the opposite end of the scale and I wasn't taking it at all, to try and be normal, to try and be strong and be like other people that I had seen that didn't need to take medication or anything like that, it was my way of trying to justify that and have power in myself.
Did you have any sense at the time that it was self-harm?
No.
You'd never have defined it as self-harm?
I would never have defined it as self-harm. In my head, I was being stubborn and stupid. That's what I was telling myself.
You thought you were being stupid?
I thought I was being stupid, because I knew there was something that wasn't right about what I was doing with this medication, because there's instructions in the box for a reason. They're telling you to take it this way for a reason, because they know it will help, or they're hoping it will help you. So I told myself quite a lot of the time that, yeah, in one way I was justifying it and that it gave me power and I was controlling that and that felt good, but there was something at the back of my mind that made me feel stupid. And I don't know if that was people round about me kind of saying, you really need to take your medication the way that you're told to do it, or like the old, you're being silly, why are you doing that? But that's as far as the questions ever went. Nobody wanted to know anything by that.
What's the difference between, say, an addiction to those meds and using them in a self-harm way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I questioned myself a lot on this over the years over whether or not I was quote unquote an addict. But from my point of view, from my perspective, was I never took them for that, what we kind of understand people to take drugs for that hit, for that high, for that low, whatever it is that they get out of that, from whatever drug it is that they use. And I didn't need it every single day. I wasn't chasing that. That's not what I did that for. And when I did kind of go to the opposite end of the scale and I took too much, it was like, it was so infrequent, and I wasn't going out to seek out other medications. I wasn't going out to seek out other drugs. I wasn't kind of falling down that rabbit hole, so to speak. But I did sit and question myself on it to go, am I addicted? Is this what I'm doing it for? But the fact that I could give it up and walk away from it for months on end and no need it, no feel it, no have any requirements for it, because I was at the polar end of it, having had discussions throughout the years with mental health teams and CPNs and GPs and doctors and things like that. I was never an addict. I'm not an addict. It was my purpose was different, my function was different, and my requirements were completely different.
What kind of impact over time did this, I'll use the word, I hope carefully, abusing medication have on your body?
It wasn't the best. It really wasn't. I ended up with problems with my kidneys for a wee bit, but the worst part for me was what it did to my mental health, what it did to me educating myself around what I needed as a person. And I went into massive decline several times and ended up needing hospitalised at one point under the Mental Health Act. I attempted to take my own life at certain points, but looking back at it, that was how I hurt myself. That was what I did.
At what point did the actual phrase self-harm come up then?
It came up when I had gotten a certain amount of control over my medication, but it was a lovely CPN at the time. I'd never forget her name. Her name was Lorraine Docherty. And she had asked me how I was coping and in which ways that I was choosing to cope with getting into a routine with my medication and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, like it's doing pretty good, but I've noticed that I'm maybe hurting myself in a different way, I think. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, when I'm getting really angry at the routine and the new medication and everything not working, I wasn't being patient with myself, and I was hitting myself and like maybe poking at myself with pins and stuff like that.
So it did transition into a physical harm, self-harm?
It did, yeah. But for a short period of time, because you don't stay the same with these. Well, I didn't. It's unique. This is unique to me, but I didn't stay the same, because when I kind of got it into myself that I wanted to fix one thing, it threw up another problem, and I went, right, well, I'm not doing that anymore to help it. I'm going to try this instead. And when I had explained that, she was like, you're self-harming. Like, do you know that? And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not. And she was like, no, you definitely are. I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. What do you mean?
Was that a shock?
It was a shock. It was a shock, because I don't know, I had just words in my head. It was coping strategies. Like, I thought that was what that was.
Was it always about control, do you think?
Yeah, I needed a thing that I could control.
How difficult was it to accept that that's what was going on?
Very.
Why?
Because I was already ashamed of myself. And to hear that, like kind of like yourself at the start, I assumed it was one thing and I didn't do that. So therefore it wasn't. And it was a bitter pill to swallow, and I didn't feed into it for a long time, and I ignored it. And I went, no, because I'm not cutting myself. I'm not burning myself. And I went, and I'm just hitting myself because I'm frustrated. I literally justified it down to the way people slap their leg when they stand up. But people don't punch themselves when they stand up.
Did you feel there'd be a stigma attached to it? Were you able to talk to anyone about it, apart from this great CPN?
No, I didn't really have anybody to talk to about it. There wasn't. It was something that, like, when we learned about it in school, it was so, oh, don't do that. That's, like I said, people used to say, that's silly. Why would you do that? Like, and so there was always been a stigma attached to it for me, and I felt like I couldn't tell anybody because I didn't think anybody would understand it because there was such a stigma attached to it. And generally because I also thought at one point that yes, it is a coping strategy, and where I am today it very much is, but at that time it was a very much stigmatised one, and you don't do it, you don't talk about it.
Well, so I can imagine, Char, how would you find the words to actually turn around and say to someone, so I've been hitting myself? It's
a daunting thing to say to somebody.
I can imagine it being a huge thing.
Yeah.
And trying to find the circumstances in place where that would feel okay to say would be fantastically difficult.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy, and I didn't do it for a long time until my risky behaviours became too much, and I ended up saying it to myself first. Because you've got to say it to yourself first before you say it to anybody else.
Let's hold that thought and come back to it. If you're listening to this and Char's story is striking a chord and you need someone to talk to, then you can text Mikeysline on 07786 20 77 55. That's 07786 20 77 55. Or you can contact them via Messenger, webchat and WhatsApp. The number for WhatsApp is 01463 729 000. Or if you're in the Highlands near Inverness, you can go and visit them. They're at the Hive, 4 Strothers Lane, Inverness. They're open 7 days a week from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and all those details and links are in the show notes. So you said the first step was to admit it to yourself.
Yeah.
How did you admit it to yourself? What form did that take, if that's not a curious question to ask?
No, that's fine. I had actually been seeing the CPN for quite some time and still doing this and still hiding certain behaviours and actions and things like that. And I'm a huge fan of something called free writing. I love it. It's one of the best things ever. I still use it to this day. And I had been doing that one night, and I just started to write the term self-harm down, and I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. And then I wrote it more and more and more. And then I wrote on a piece of paper, "You're self-harming." And then I ripped it up and flung it away. I was like, nope, we're not doing that. But I had, in a way, I had said it to myself. Like, I needed to admit it. I needed to see it there on paper, because people had been, at this point, I'd been seeing the CPN for quite some time, and she was lovely. She was trying to do her best, and I was like, I'm not. Like, I don't know where you're getting that from, but...
It's like by writing it down, it sounds like you broke your own stigma about self-harm.
looking back on it, I'm really proud that I wrote it down and put it there, like bold, because if you're going to tell yourself something, say it loud, get it out. But it terrified me. But then when I did it again, the next time I wrote it down, I highlighted it, and then the time after that, I coloured it in. Next time after that, I made it bolder, I made it bigger, I made it brighter. And then I started, I think after a wee while, I started believing it. I was like, no, you need to do something about this. But admitting it to myself was hard and horrible, and I didn't like it. But I then started to appreciate it because things became clearer. I started to understand myself a wee bit better. I started looking at my mental health in a better light. I started taking care of my physical health. I started to look at what I want my life to look like, because for so long I had let my past muddy my future, and I was tired.
So you got to a point, this bold, brave point of writing down that you were a self-harmer.
Mm-hmm.
And you've really got to the point of taking that on board. So, okay, now you're sitting in this difficult space where you're thinking, okay, I'm a self-harmer, and presumably gave you a chance to think, I've been doing this 4 years in all these different ways.
Yeah.
How do you move forward from that point? How do you get help?
I didn't know what to do with that information after it. And it was information somebody else had given me, and then information that I had given myself. But I'm quite stubborn, in case you didn't notice. What I did after that was I took control of my medication in a different way again. I went to my GP and I asked to be put to weekly prescriptions, and then if we could build it up for there. I then spoke to my CPN about the hitting and the needle pinching and things like that, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't figure this out. And that was when I started kind of looking at other things around what makes me happy, what do I enjoy, where do I want things to go, because the structure that I know around self-harm and self-harm support now is so different to when it was me, that there wasn't really anything that was specific for me to help me, and people kind of come up with suggestions like put an elastic band on your wrist or hold some ice, and have you tried counting to 10? And I'm like, I've counted to 1,000. Like, it's not working. What do we do? So when I started to look at how I needed to help myself, it was also saying, where am I? Where do I place myself in all of this? Am I a point of priority in my life? Because as much as I'd started to control a lot of things to try and make them safer, yes, I replaced them with something else, but at the end of the day, it just came back to that factor of being a mum. I need to, like, it wasn't, at first it was, I need to be a mum, I need to fix myself, I need to be better, but then it became, I want to be better, because I enjoy that, because I get so much out of this wee girl that I'm finding the fun in it. And at 17, when you're in that type of relationship and you've been through things and you've faced homelessness and things like that, you kind of let a lot of what's happened to you before dictate what's going to happen to you in the future. And I don't have a crystal ball. I'd won the lottery 4 times over by then, but I don't. And you need to let yourself believe that, yeah, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but if you're wanting to make a change and you know that you've got that wee glimmer somewhere, follow it. It will take you somewhere else. You might stumble along the way and you might be confused and you might get upset and angry all over again, but that's okay, because your emotions are real.
To what extent was part of this having to let the part of you that felt out of control go was part of this sort of letting the past lie and accepting that you can't or might not need to control things.
Yeah.
So,
I wasn't very good at letting other people control things. Like I say, really stubborn and really set in my ways. But acceptance of a lot of things, being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You really need to be okay with that at some point, and it's not easy because we spend so much of our lives going, I like this is really good, I'm going to stay here. I don't like that because it's scary and uncomfortable, but that'll take you somewhere else. So that was a huge kind of step for me to let myself be uncomfortable.
without reaching for a crutch of some kind.
Yeah, because we don't stay the same. We completely change all the time. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. And I'm definitely not that wee girl that had a baby. So I think I needed to learn that that's okay. We can change. You don't need to stay there. We're not static. And it's okay to move when everything else moves. Because not everything's going to keep going in the same direction. And it's scary, but it's possible and it's doable, and it's finding out where you fit in it and seeing who you are with each thing that comes.
Was it a slow letting go of the self-harming behaviour? Or was it almost kind of cold turkey, I've let go of it and I've stopped doing it right now?
Very slow.
Very slow.
It was very slow. Because that made me feel better. I controlled everything. That's what I was telling myself. But that's really difficult. But at the same time, when we are trying to change something that is so ingrained in us and is so comforting to us in a way, be it whether or not you're self-harming for control, or like I sometimes self-harmed when I was happy, and that was even more confusing because I didn't know what to do, but I knew I could control it. And when you're trying to kind of navigate that and you're trying to let go, it's like your baby blanket. You never give it up. It's always somewhere, and you always know that it's going to be about, but you don't need it every single day. So it was giving up little bits over the periods of days, weeks, months. And I work with this amazing group of people, and it's all completely unique to ourselves as individuals. But I've always kind of said recovery for me is constant. I need to keep it in check. I need to stay ahead of it because I know my personality. I took the time to learn what it was, and that took a long time because it took a long time to let go.
It's clear from talking to you that what you've been through, and I imagine what an awful lot of people who self-harm go through, it is complicated.
Yeah.
It's not linear.
No.
It's multi-level, multifaceted. So if you're standing outside of someone you care about, who you are seeing self-harm, it's fantastically difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And really difficult to know where to begin to offer support and in what form, because of course if you love someone, the last thing you want to see them do is be hurting.
Yeah.
And yet they're hurting so much that they reach to hurt themselves to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly difficult to witness that. I don't know if you have anything to offer up from your perspective to those of us who might be on the outside
Yeah.
watching this and desperate to help or support in some way.
Mm-hmm. What I can say is if you're there and you're looking in on that and you see that and you know that it has sparked something in you, some level of concern, or even if you're hurt and you're upset or you're confused and angry about it, that in itself is a very caring reaction. But what my advice on that would be is compassion. Give that somebody, if you know they're hurting themselves in one way or another because there's something going on for them and they don't know how to deal with it, have that conversation. Be honest with them. Tell them that you don't understand but that you want to. And if they want to let you in, that's their choice. But I think just letting somebody know that you're there and that you want to understand it and you want to help is fantastic. You can do loads of things. You can, like a lot of people that I talk to, they'll specifically dedicate time to go away and educate themselves on it. Like they'll try and understand it, but not forcing it too much, because we can sometimes have the polar opposite reaction, or somebody will just run away and shut themselves off and they'll be like, oh no, somebody knows, what am I going to do? But if you've got time and you give them a wee bit of space and you show them that you're there and you've got that compassionate response, it becomes easier. And yeah, it might be scary for somebody like myself who does self-harm or did self-harm in the past to go, oh no, somebody knows, I don't know what to do. It turns into, thank God somebody else knows. And that's a relief. That's a huge relief.
Tell me about your role now as a peer practitioner, mm-hmm. because you've moved to the position of
yeah.
So much understanding that you spend your time supporting others.
Yeah.
What does that entail? Tell us about it.
So I've been working with the Self-Harm Network Scotland for just a little over 2.5 years now. And in my role, what I do as a peer practitioner is I use my lived experience and my knowledge and my background on self-harm to let other people explore their self-harm for themselves. A lot of the people that kind of come and want support they know they want something to change, they maybe don't have the space to talk about it, they don't have the forum to talk about it without feeling quite a lot of the time ashamed, stigmatised, embarrassed, when in actual fact nothing to be ashamed of, absolutely nothing. I like to use the term, we kind of kick the door down about self-harm and we're here to shout about it because you've got nothing to be ashamed about. It's a coping strategy. And when we kind of bring people in and we have these guided, supported sessions with them, it's about giving them that control, giving them something where they can go, right, I get to talk to this person about my self-harm and I can really kind of open up.
With no judgment.
No judgment whatsoever.
Because of course opening up to someone you love, you might be afraid that they'll withdraw their love.
Yeah.
That they'll judge you.
Yeah.
But you're not doing that.
No, that's the last thing that we are here to do. And I enjoy kind of talking to people about it so much that sometimes when I start speaking to somebody new and you're relating back to them, they can be a wee bit shocked and go, well, you're really talking about that. And I'm like, yup, that's what I'm here to do. I've got to a point where I can confidently say, yeah, I am somebody that used to self-harm. I am somebody that is in a constant state of recovery. I'm so comfortable with that. I'm so happy with that. That if I can kind of show or teach or guide or just be there for somebody else that wants to maybe try it, but it can be absolutely terrifying to go, yeah, I remember being that scared. Yep, I can completely relate.
To what extent does the fact that you are so comfortable now talking about it and revisiting what went on, but is that Does that help? Is it like a constant kind of reevaluation of your past and where you were at, and it helps keep you clear from self-harming now?
Definitely keeps me grounded, and it keeps me accountable to myself, because when you get to that point, like I said earlier, you've got to admit it to yourself first. You've got to be honest with yourself. You're not being honest with yourself, you're not being honest with anybody else. And so when I do this and I get to work with this fantastic bunch of just the best people that we all can relate to as well, that it holds me accountable to constantly check in with myself, because that's something that I do like to do. I lean into the fact that I've got mental health issues. I routinely take my medication at a set routine. I love my wee medication routine now. It's like, that's my thing now. I'm like, I'm so good at this. But for me, this is what helps. This is what works. This is how I progress. And being constantly honest with myself and where I'm at and how I'm changing with these things is how I keep my recovery going.
I'm a big advocate for honesty. I think it's one of the most undervalued, underused tools in our pockets.
And I am one of these people that I'll speak to these fantastic, supportive people, and I'll be like, how are you about being honest with yourself? Like, are we comfortable with that? But it's about kind of, how do you evaluate yourself? What questions do you actually need to ask yourself in order to figure out where it is you want to go? Because it's what part of your life is it that you're trying to cope with, and how do you make that better? How can we make that safer? How are we making effective, safe decisions?
I started this conversation, Chad, by saying that I'd never thought of self-harm away from what is the stereotype out there. I wondered, through your work now, how common is other forms of self-harm? How much is going under the wire? Are you coming across it a lot? People like yourself?
Yeah. Which, when I kind of first started, it wasn't so much as a surprise as it was the level, the volume that I was seeing, because there are people that self-harm in so many different ways that sometimes when they, like, even if they might hear me speaking today, they might kind of think, oh, okay. Yeah, so it opens doors to opportunity for people to kind of check in with themselves and see how they're doing and where they're at. But it is so widespread and it varies so much, but it's completely unique to each and every single person. So I may have self-harmed the same way somebody else does, but that we all have things in common about it and things we can relate to each other about it, but it's completely unique to me.
If someone is listening to this, who thinks, hang on a sec, I'm recognising some of this.
Yeah.
What's the first step?
Ask yourself the question again. See how you feel about it the next day. Notice what it is that you feel might be going on for you. If you're ever in doubt, speak to somebody, because talking to somebody, even just for 5-10 minutes, about getting an opinion on something can change your whole outlook on anything. Come and talk to us. See what it is that you're thinking and ask the question. Never stop asking yourself the question, because you will eventually get the answer and you'll get help if that is the case.
When you say come and talk to us, where would people find you, Cha?
So you'll find us online at the Self-Harm Network Scotland. We are there on our website. We've got the links to our referral forms, and we also operate a live chat every single night for people who are self-harming, people that are struggling with it, people like, if it's happening in the household, family members, friends, anything like that. We've got a live chat where people can come and talk to us from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. every single night. But we also offer things like loved one support groups as well, because when somebody comes in to support with us, we take everybody into consideration as well. And if we can make a wee bit extra better for you at the same time as offering you support, then we're going to do it.
We'll put links to Self-Harm Network Scotland, of course, in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for sharing your story. It's been a massive education for me.
Oh, no, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to take my mask off for a wee bit and actually say it out loud, because it's good and it's healthy, and I hope it helps.
It's great to see you in such a good place.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Cha.
Thanks.
Huge thanks to Cha Harris for that conversation. Now here's Shona from Mikeysline with a few thoughts. What did you take away from that conversation? I found it actually really moving, speaking to Cha. It was one of the most emotional conversations I've done, for lots of different reasons, but I'd be interested to know what you took from it.
I think one thing I really took from it was the way that self-harm can show up so differently in different people, that it's not kind of, it can take many forms and can happen for many different reasons. And Cha's way of accepting the truth for herself before then asking for help around that, I think that was came across really clearly. And I am so encouraged that Cha had a community CPN, community psychiatric nurse, that was incredibly insightful and compassionate. And the reason I guess this is coming across so encouragingly for me is that sadly, I think often historically, when people have self-harmed, they haven't always the most important things that in meeting someone with empathy. And the other thing that came across in that document was not having a kind of reductionist risk assessment approach, but rather having a psychosocial approach. Because two of the things that we know about self-harm is that it can be closely associated with risk of suicide. And the other is that self-harm is usually a symptom or a behaviour to show that something is wrong underneath. Somebody's in great emotional pain and they're seeking control, or they're seeking relief in some way, or trying to punish themselves in some way because of an underlying difficulty or problem. So by us having that compassionate empathy that enables someone to then not have shame in themselves, and to say, oh yeah, to look inside and to be able to get more insight into what's wrong, as Cha did, I think. She has great insight into why she was having to harm in these ways. So yeah, an incredibly insightful interview, and I'm really grateful to her for her clarity around sharing.
Thank you, Shona. Huge thanks to not just Shona, but the whole team at Mikeysline for the work that they do. Don't forget, if you need someone to talk to or some help, then you can text Mikeysline on 07786 20 77 55, or you can contact them via Messenger, webchat or WhatsApp. The number for WhatsApp is 01463 729 000. And if you're in the Highlands, you can of course go and visit Mikeysline at the Hive, 4 Strothers Lane, Inverness. They're open 7 days a week from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m, and all those details and links are in the show notes. Speaking of Suicide is funded by Mikeysline, and the platform is sponsored by Highland-based family firm D&D Paving Limited. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Or if you'd like to share your story. Speaking of Suicide is produced by Adventurous Audio Limited.